So we're going to go through, talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned on the migration to DITA during corporate acquisitions. And this is from the outline, but it was really fun to be able to tell my family that I was just waiting on the European Union to approve a $10.5 billion takeover so that we could move ahead with converting hundreds of thousands of topics from source content to DITA. And up until the sentence about converting source content to DITA, they sort of followed along, and at that point the eyes glazed over. But there was a lot of interesting stuff along the way. Jolene, if people want to reach out to you, I've put your QR code to the LinkedIn page here. So anybody who's sitting at home, or for the 3 people who still go to the office on Earth, if you're at the office, grab your phone. If you scan that, I'll put the QR code back up at the end for Jolene and for myself so that you can reach out to us. And that is a LinkedIn code. And again, it'll be there at the end. And yes, we will share the slides. But Jolene, do you want to give a quick background on you?
Yeah, I'll do something very quickly because we had a little chat earlier. So my background, which doesn't say so here, but I have spent my entire career in tech pubs. I am currently a people manager and have been for probably around 15 years. I have a lot of expertise in content migration, given the large number of acquisitions that I have been a part of over the last 10 years. I've got about 25 years of tech pubs experience. I have been with my current company in its various iterations, probably about I've been with them since 1993, but the company name has changed a number of times. With acquisitions, I've been acquired and also been on both ends of that. And then content strategy is one of my favorite things, and we do a lot of that at Broadcom these days, and TechPub's best practices. So that's my background.
It's funny, you mentioned a bunch of different acquisitions along the way. Sure. I think somebody I was speaking with at one point said, I'm still sitting in the same chair I sat in 20 years ago, and I'm my fourth company.
Well, yeah, and I'm in Fort Collins, which is Colorado, which is where I've always been. But the company has changed, headquarters and names and all of that kind of thing throughout the years, I should say. Okay.
Yeah. So I've got my QR code up there as well, and again, it'll be up at the very end. For any who are wondering along the way, the video shares. There's the Alexander Keith sitting here. Disable the video again. Background, pretty involved in content for years and years. I get to geek. I get to do a bunch of things around the training side, the content management, and one of the presentations I went to in the early 2000s was in Toronto. A guy came to it. It was IEEE. I was presenting on structured FrameMaker. He thought it was interesting. I figured I'd go to his session because I thought it was interesting, and it was Michael Priestley doing one of his first sessions outside of IBM on DITA. So I've been involved on that side for quite a while, and historically involved with the STC, the Society for Technical Communications. A lot of fun there, a lot of interesting stuff in regards to documentation. So for today, some of the takeaways that we want to talk about is generally just things around planning for the content migration, some of the lessons that have been learned along the way. Jolene's side from being inside the organization, mine from being the one doing the conversion side of things, and talk a little bit about content analysis, more than just the conversion to topics and maps, some of the other things to think about. So Jolene, I've got the talking slide here for the CA acquisition. I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. So we're going to start with the very first acquisition before we engaged with Bernard and Publishing Smarter, because this is where a lot of, from the internal point of view, where a lot of our lessons learned came from. Prior to the acquisition of CA Technologies, Broadcom was largely a hardware company, a semiconductor company. We had several product groups that were in DITA, and we did have a content management system, but many of our business units were using unstructured FrameMaker to deliver PDFs. And we delivered both secure PDFs on a site where customers had to log in to get their confidential content, and also to the public site with small data sheets on a given product and so on. So with the acquisition of CA Technologies, it was really the very first large software acquisition that we had done. And it made a major shift, a major pivot in the way that we had to look at the delivery of content. And our current system did not enable that, and so we had to look for a new way to do this. We were needing to deliver HTML, and we needed to build a website with PDFs being a secondary consideration. It also drove us into the need for figuring out how to do context-sensitive help through the website. And so with that acquisition, our pivot changed in a very major way. And so we built the TechDocs website using AEM and the XML add-on. CA was already delivering HTML for about 300 different products, but from 3 different sources. So that meant that we had 3 different systems and adding Broadcom's 2 ways of delivering content. So we decided we wanted to go with one system, and it needed to serve both Broadcom and the CA's needs from a business perspective. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, and this is where we got to jump in. So this one becomes more fun.
This one is more fun. So I should say we had to move 1.7 million pieces of content in that very first. So, it was trial by fire. We were building a website, we were moving content, and meeting an end-to-end goal of a publishing system. So now we go to the second acquisition, where we decided what we really needed to do was engage someone, a company that had expertise in DITA specifically, more depth. The good thing about this is that I consider it to be a smaller migration. We had about 300,000 pages of HTML that we needed to move. They were largely structured in nature. The product content is structured in that it was DocBook, so at least it was somewhat structured. We had an architecture inside of the AEM database that was already in place, and we had our CSS and all of our templates already in place. So we were pretty far ahead. We didn't have to build everything from the ground up the way that we did originally. So instead of having to build both the database architecture and the site arc, we just had to focus on that information architecture and the structure of what we wanted the site to look like and how customers were going to access the content.
And again, for those who are attending, bear in mind 300,000 HTML pages is a smaller migration. It was incredible when we started looking at this in order to identify what some of the things were inside the content. And I know that there were issues that you guys had run into collectively in the past as well, Jolene, and it was great because you were able to go in from previous experience, and hopefully during this session we can pass on a little bit of that previous experience to others who are getting started. But some of the bigger issues.
Some of the bigger issues, had to do with cleanup prior to migrating the content. When you're dealing with non-uniform and unstructured content, coding that up, we were using scripts to transform the content from the whatever structure it was, and we had 3 different kind of content formats to DITA. We had some difficulties with the scripting up of the non-uniform content, and that meant that there was quite a lot of cleanup after the migration, and that was left to both my team and the writers on staff for the different business units. We also made some decisions early on in the interest of getting everything moved, because when you're moving that much content and you have a deadline that you're trying to meet, we needed to get everything into the system. So we did allow some overrides to the DITA standard and some custom elements, and this did cause some issues down the line in terms of output generation issues, because we chose to use the open toolkit inside of AEM to deliver PDFs, and that became a little bit problematic. There was quite a lot of cleanup to do due to the overrides and due to how some of the migration came over with the scripting. Our original architecture and folder structure, it didn't really result in the most efficient use of the processing resources that we had with AEM. So we've learned quite a bit about how the architecture inside of AEM and how better you can move your material to make DITA work for you and make the output work for you a lot better. We chose not to use FrameMaker Server for PDF and offline HTML generation. We are now moving toward that because we think it will make things a lot easier and give us a lot better design on our output. We need HTML5 generation for offline HTML. We have some customers that are not allowed to be on the web, and so we have to deliver the content to them offline. And then, so.
You also had multiple languages, right?
We do have multiple languages, yes. We had up to some products were 12 to 13 languages that we were moving content. We are now down to between 4 and 6 languages, company standard. But at that time, we were moving all of the languages and all of the some of our products we keep up to, 6 to 10 different releases on the site itself. So we have a pull-down menu for the different languages and a pull-down menu for the different releases. So we do have a little bit of complexity that we may not have had, and it added a little bit because we don't do translation of sites. We do translation of the actual DITA content within the specific product. So we have a lot of products that don't get any translation, but about 20 to 25% do. And so we had to kind of figure out the best way to do something with our architecture within the folder structure to make that happen. And we did, so that's one of the main things for us.
Yeah, and I'm just throwing in a couple of the chat or a couple of the Q&A things that come along as well in the conversation. One of the things that we ran into on our side was, it was a good-sized chunk of information, but it was also coming from a legacy CCMS, which actually migrated pretty easily once we figured out the patterns of the docbook material and how that was going to map to DITA. And, in some cases, it was grab this element combination or grab this attribute and value combination, restructure it and reorganize it. So not only were we able to go in and do some of the conversion, but we were able to address some of the things like the structured content is the same for English and Spanish and French and Japanese. And therefore, once the rules are in place for the transformation to DITA, we were able to repeatedly apply them. That was really cool. I think the bigger challenges were the source madcap material and the source FrameMaker material, just in part because, and many people will know this from previous experiences, if you provide somebody with a template and it's not a structured template, and I go back to what Marco was showing in the last presentation with that structured template and the snippets that people would work with, if you provide them, here's a document, they'll go in and start deciding, and with nothing evil in mind, but they'll start deciding on what the structure is that works well and how they organize and when something is a heading 1 or a 2 or a 3. And in some cases, we found that it skipped from a heading 1 to a heading 4 because it looked right. In other cases, we took madcap material that was, it was well enough written and organized, but it was done by multiple different people, each of whom used the standard, and I put air quotes around it, that madcap provides in order to do their own thing. And yes, everything was standardized in that it was madcap Flare material, but it wasn't standardized across, thousands and thousands of documents created by dozens and dozens of writers over the span of years and years and years. So going through and bringing it to DITA, it gave us that standard. We were able to look at it and say, the goal is to take the content, regardless of what we're starting with, and bring it to this one specification. And once it's in that one specification, we can take advantage of all of the DITA things that exist. So a lot of really good things came from it. We were able to far more consistently start being able to publish, far more consistently being able to go in and load material into the system. And even when we did discover something that didn't work right, we were able to go back and say, well, structurally, we know where the thing is. Let's pull it down from AEM, push the values back into it, and put it back into the system. So there was some really cool stuff there. And I know you went to DITA for a bunch of reasons. Those are some of the things that came to mind for me. What about on your side?
On our side, again, and I think someone else mentioned this earlier, it does enforce topic-based writing and it does enforce structured writing. And those are two really important things, especially when you're delivering HTML, I think, because people don't always come into your site and they're not reading books cover to cover anymore. They're coming in to look for a specific thing. For us, we're still working on the content reuse. I think snippets is going to help quite a lot. And also the restructure of parts of the database will help with that too. And of course, we have a lot of conditional content within our database. And so that's the other thing. And we wanted to be able to share content across different versions of products and such. So those are the main things to go to DITA. But the other thing is we're enforcing a look and feel. Yes, we have a long way to go, of course. There's always going to be iterative improvements that can be made and so on. But those are the main things. It's going to take the content and separate it from that look and feel. And I really like that, because if you have something coded up, you're using an element in a certain way. If you decide later you want to change the look and feel of that element, it's very easy to do all across the entire database, all across the entire site.
Yeah, somebody in the chat mentioned that they had to categorize. They mentioned every paragraph, but they had to categorize content into the concept, the procedure, the task, the reference. And
Yep.
One of the things that I liked with the source content that we got from you, even if people did lists in different ways, we were able to a large degree in the docbook material, find the patterns and map it to DITA. So we were able to say, if there's a list and it happens to be inside something that has a title phrasing that feels like it's going to be a task, then make it into a task rather than handing you everything as a generic topic. From a conversion standpoint, that was cool. And the other thing that really, I don't know, it drove so much of the DITA side early on when you went in and you started looking at things like the Open Toolkit or Frame Publish Server, or you're looking at AEM and a couple of different tools. What made it great was this is DITA. It's a standard of content structurally, whether or not your words are in German or Japanese or Portuguese or English or French, doesn't matter. The tags around it are going to follow the same patterns. And how you decide to structure your DITA content, are you using unordered lists? Are you list nesting? Are you putting together tasks and using step info? It almost didn't matter as long as it was DITA. And we're able to go in and say, well, what do the different tools do? How do they work with it? You got to see your content. You were also able to change your publish approach. You use the publishing approach up until it doesn't work, and then you make the decision to move somewhere else. So those are a couple of things that I like on the DITA side. The other was the security and the risk management of your content. That was really cool because I can't actually get to some of the stuff on the website. If I go in and I'm on your Tech Docs portal, and
That's
hopefully
correct.
I can go in there. I can jump in, but I can't get to everything. I've got to do my login in order to get to certain content.
You do, and so that's on purpose, and also our PDFs are locked down for that same reason. So you can get to a lot of the public content. This is mostly public content, but we also use that structure for when people want to do a beta. Let's say that you want your internal engineers to be able to test the content against the context-sensitive help. We can lock that down so the customers can't see the content, but yet our internal people can test the content against the actual user interface. So we do use the security for that reason. You bet.
Right.
Yeah, and that's one thing you get with Adobe Experience Manager.
No, you had gazillion page. Well, no, not a gazillion. You had 300,000, give or take, HTML pages.
We
and
did.
One of the things that becomes really important is locking the content down and telling an author, all right, you're done writing. Now we're going to migrate. How do you make that decision? How do you figure out what's going to work or not work?
Yeah, so that's always a very interesting decision, because you have to remember that product launches are not going to stop just because you're migrating content, whether it's because of an acquisition or whether it's because you as a company have decided to move to a different content management system. The actual product build and the actual content is always and the plan begins with the content inventory, as I've said, an analysis of the content structure. But you want to build your information architecture, and you have to agree on that with the business unit and your stakeholders of both the database and the resulting website. But along with all of that, if you can get the product launches and and understand when the next product launches are coming. And for this one, for the Symantec content migration, we were looking at between 40 and 45 products. And so what we did is we prioritized the migration based on the release schedule. So we ended up moving a lot of older content first, and that helped us to actually test the migration scripts and also do some cleanup and know how much time it would take to do the cleanup ahead of time before doing our, flagship products. So you can move the newer stuff first if you think you have enough time. For us, we didn't think we had enough time, so we chose to move the older content first. Do the testing on the older content, and then you build your migration schedule out of that. Planning for training also, and you can actually use that older content. I think Bernard will talk about that in a little bit for training. And then you have to consider the amount of time, and that there are going to be errors in the conversion, and there is going to be some cleanup that will have to be done regardless of how good the scripting is.
Did you find other groups started using AEM? Or just TechOps?
No, we just TechOps. We have actually 3 other groups using AEM on the hardware side of the house. They were in DITA already and just moved them over to AEM. That was a migration that happened in between these 2 acquisitions. So again, we had to kind of look at their release schedule. It would be a good time to move them off of our own system onto AEM. So we've got those 3 plus the CA business units plus Symantec. So there are very few business units. We have Broadcom is about 23 business units total, and of that, all the software stuff is pretty much in AEM.
Okay. And on our side, Nadine, I just saw your comment about the audio from Jolene's side being a little choppy. Is mine coming through crisp?
No.
I'm just keeping an eye in the chat. I'll continue to move ahead.
Your sound is fine, Bernard, but I get some disturbances on Jolene's.
Okay. Well, let me just see.
Okay, and Jolene, I caught it. It was just a little gravelly at times, so may want to double check. In any case, on our side, and I'll address one of the questions that came up in regards to some of the training as well. The minimum amount of time to get confident in developing content according to DITA. Let me hit up the training side for just a moment. I sort of semi-jokingly tell people when I do a training class that everything we do in the first hour, they're going to know by the end of the day. Everything that we do in the second hour, they'll know after their first full day of working with it actively, and that you can convert hours into days. If you're sitting in and it's an 8-hour class, it'll take you about 8 days of working with it until you get mostly comfortable with it, and 8 weeks of actively working with it until it's just second nature and you don't even think about it. And that's a total knee-jerk number based on having done a lot of training over the years. But if it's in the training environment here, we did a set of half-day sessions, and I think it really helped that we went in and we would do 2 or 3 hours of training with actual material that was inside your actual AEM environment and gave people the hands-on opportunity to work with it. We wanted to make sure that from a planning standpoint that we knew what topics to cover in the training, but from a reality standpoint, we went in and just gave people hands-on and didn't overload them by doing a full week of training and saying, here's your 5 days. Instead, we went through and we said, let's take those 5 full days, those 40-hour in a week, and divide it up into half. And we'll do 10 sessions, and we'll just do half of a day once a week for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. And it really gave people a chance to work hands-on and dive in and still get their work done and come back with active and real questions. So that was really cool for us. We expected that the source structures would be uniform, and in what we got from the legacy CMS tool, we did get that. There was a very uniform approach to the content. But the reality was, when we went in and started looking at source content in FrameMaker and source content in Madcap, we had inconsistencies in the material. And in some cases, there was some content that was a complete rewrite. There was some content that required manual reorganization, whether it was on our end or on your end. That takes time, and trying to go through early on, I would say try to find some of the more complex, so from a lesson learned, find some of the more complex information, find some of the materials that don't necessarily do what you expect them to do. If you can find the things that are tricky and you can resolve those earlier on, boy, is it ever nice in comparison to finding that problem when you get down to the crunch. And it is tricky to go in and say, this is the stuff that's going to be difficult. So content analysis prior to migration becomes another sort of an important part of the overall conversation. There's definitely a lot of things you plan for, and there is discovery. And during the discovery, you start to find out what's really happening. Jolene, let's see how your audio is again. If I throw it back over to you on some of the challenges that your group had to overcome. We talked about the training. I mentioned using the actual materials, but I'll turn it back to you and fingers crossed. Hey, look at that. Must be live. Either her system is now not giving the audio, or it's mine that has gone completely away. Stefan or Matt, how are we coming through? Okay. So while we're waiting to see if Jolene's audio comes in, she had mentioned a couple of different things in regards to the content cleanup that floored me. It was incredible once the content was migrated and it was DITA and it was consistent. They were able to go through and take advantage of automated publishing in the AEM environment as opposed to doing the manual publishing. Now, it still takes time. They have,
Yes,
really
so
large volumes.
can you hear
Go
me?
ahead, Jolene.
Can you?
Yep.
Yeah, can
Fire
you hear
away.
me now? Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I guess, all of us working at home, I did get disconnected a little bit.
Did you
So
remember to grab a beer?
No, I have coffee. I'm trying to stay awake. I mean,
Yeah, all right,
let's
fair
see.
enough. I
Yeah,
was just talking about the publishing speed, the changes. That was just one
right.
of the things, but go ahead, the content
Yeah,
cleanup and
so
the results.
there are a couple of things too. The content cleanup, when we're talking about content cleanup, we're really talking about the CA technologies and also the differences in the way that you pulled in actual, clean data. I like to call it clean, without overrides. It did increase. We had things really ran about 66% faster than they did previously. So if we do a compare, something that, and when we say things that generate 30 minutes to 10 minutes, we have some sites that are 10,000 pages, some that are even bigger than that. And, we generate content. Some people generate every week, some people generate every 2 months. So we're doing an awful lot of content. And so I think, Bernard, you did the savings, and that's about 266 hours annually, just for the publishing part. The other thing that we have, and I don't know if this is generally, available to others that are using AEM, but to help us with our publishing, we have bulk publishing. So we're not using the standard route for publishing material where you're publishing each and every individual topic using the regular publishing mode. We have bulk publishing, which really is like packaging it up and pushing it through the system. And so that's helped us an awful lot where people are working along and they're able to publish. So that's been helpful.
The one that was killing me, I was looking at this and I started laughing on this end. So 266 hours, we went through and said, all right, so that's the equivalent of a month and a half. Can you imagine having somebody that comes in and you say, all right, so what we're going to get you to do, we're going to get you to work in our tech docs group. It's going to be really cool. We're using cutting edge tools. We're doing stuff that nobody else is doing yet. We're taking huge volumes of material. We're bringing together all these corporate acquisitions. And what we need you to do for your first 6 weeks is choose file save as PDF, file save as HTML5, file save as PDF, file save as HTML5. Go.
Generate content and then press publish. Yes. So yeah, we've saved an awful lot of time. And when you talk about across about 150 to plus my team, about 170 people on the system today, not counting the reviewers. We've got about 2,500 to 3,000 engineering reviewers who are in the system. working on reviews for content. So that's a lot of time we're
Yeah, and
saving.
again, there were, I mean, 300,000, but there were also 700 PDF documents, and those came
Yes.
forth from multiple like it came from Madcap, it came from FrameMaker. There were, what is it, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of topics that resulted from that material?
That's correct. So a lot of the semantic, their products, they'll do a help site, which is what we have on techdocs.broadcom.com. And then some of their products deliver up to 20 or so, some a little more than that, specialized PDFs. So what they've done is they have a special map pulled from, source content. So we have a content folder that has all the topics and all the graphics in it, and they do a mix of material. So they'll make a PDF, they can mix and match so that they can deliver PDFs to their customers in a special way. So we'll see. We'll see how that all works out over time. I'm hoping to go more toward the HTML delivery with them over time, but that's really a business decision on their part.
And now with the reflow in PDF, I gotta say, hats off to Adobe for that. It's pretty impressive. I've had a couple of even older legacy PDF documents that I've had for all kinds of things, and I pop it open on my phone now, and it reflows into something that's very readable.
Nice.
I know on our side we hit a bunch of challenges because we did have that mix of sources. We would go in and come up with a conversion workflow that worked for the legacy CCMS, but then had to tweak for for FrameMaker or for Madcap material. That was a biggie. So we weren't able to simply say, this is the conversion. We also knew that your DITA implementation is different than someone else's DITA implementation. Tomorrow, there's a session that I'm doing with Gulfstream, and their implementation quite different because they are a different company with different needs. So just going in and saying, yeah, here is your conversion workflow doesn't cut it. But we did want to come up with these repeatable approaches, and depending on where you are on Earth, repeatable processes or processes. That was a fun one to go in and deal with, because when we didn't get it right, everything we handed you broke, and people were losing their minds looking at it going, what are they doing? Why aren't they not a single thing works? And then we went in and we said, oh, so we've got to tweak these 2 lines. And then we handed it over and they said, oh wait, everything works perfectly.
Yep. So once you get the scripting right, so I think your point is that, it's an iterative process with the scripting. I think you might have noticed too that, we try to hand off the hardest cases.
Yep.
And that's really important. Get your most complicated content, and use that to do your scripting, because that's going to give you a better outcome.
Yeah, and it was interesting for us because some people go in and say, get the win early. And I agree with that. As consultants, we want to show you something that works early on. But I think in our case, we already had a good working relationship as well from historical things.
Sure.
So that was, and the in-person side, losing that because of work from home and cutting the travel, that was incredible. I actually was supposed to be at your physical office, not Broadcom, at your office the week ending on that Friday when they shut down the Canadian-American border for travel. So I would have been scrambling, hoping to get onto a plane and not bounced onto the next flight. But it's really tough to be able to point to, this thing here on the computer screen, or doing that iterative work that we were talking about, where we can just go in and say, hey, here's a little sample. Let's take a quick look. This work? No? All right. So how about, okay, that's good. So that was another one to deal with. And then the tech issues, even ironically, the tech issues that we're running into just in something like this Adobe DITA World Day, where we have the audio issues at times, we have the screen share issues at times, and it makes it much more of a human thing, though. The challenge there is not really the technology. It's just making sure that people understand that sometimes the technology is a bit of an issue and we need to continue to work with it. But we also had tracing down the problem. There were times where we said, well, the DITA is valid. It's good. Why doesn't it work? And in some cases, the issue was AEM. There were things that didn't work right. And I mean, I know you were frustrated. I was frustrated. Adobe was frustrated when we would turn around and say, this doesn't work. But to their credit, the dev team, I mean, I don't even know what time it was when we would reach out to them and they would have somebody there working on it, just putting in the hours around the globe in order to help out. I thought that was a really impressive thing by them.
Yeah, I think we learned to use WebEx very effectively. We did start to have daily meetings, short, 15 minutes, 20-minute meetings where we just would check in every single day. And I think that we had to do that in order to keep things moving because we didn't have those long sessions where we were all there in person working together. I think it made a big difference. And so that's one way you can compensate for not being able to get together. I think we're lucky that the technology is, although difficult sometimes, and we do get disconnected as we've all seen, I think it was effective. That I can say.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, there's an awful lot to be said about being able to have that consistent and reliable content. I've got an engineer friend. His standing joke is, the great thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. And DITA is a standard, and how it's implemented can be different from one company to the other. But you had one of those, we know what we want. And in a couple of cases, we had a back and forth conversation about, are you sure? And sometimes it was, yep, absolutely. And other times it was, you know what, that's actually a good idea. But once we got to it, we had that consistent, we had the reliable content. We were able to go in and say, all right, now we have that very clearly defined after. And we, from our standpoint, getting the code in place in order to convert becomes much, much easier when we know what the target is.
Yeah, and I can't say enough about eliminating overrides and custom elements.
Well, BC heading 2?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, BC heading 2, which we had to do for the original CA migration because of timing, and there were a number of reasons. So I don't regret that decision, but given that I got to make a different decision for this particular migration, I think going to as much of the standard as possible and adhering to that standard really has made this, it was very seamless in terms of the pull on the system. Sometimes when you're doing a content migration, you're moving large amounts of content into a system, it can use up resources and slow the system down. But we didn't see that with this migration at all. When we uploaded things, it didn't seem to have any effect on the CPU load or anything like that. And I have to, think that that's because it's completely standard and no override.
And we simplified. That was one of the other big successes, was going from, imagine the equivalent for those who are listening in, imagine the equivalent of trying to search through your entire hard drive with every folder, subfolder, subfolder, miscellaneous / subfolder 5000, all of those locations. And then somebody says, go find a picture or go find a topic. And it's really difficult to do. If you can clean up the folder structure, and I'm not saying flatten it, but if we're able to clean up the folder structure, those things start to make a really big difference as well. And we take advantage of the system itself and the capabilities of AEM to find the information.
That's absolutely right. It matters. One of the biggest lessons that I learned is it matters how the content is sitting inside of the database, whether or not during content, generation, if the system needs to go over and down a content structure to grab material, it takes longer. It takes longer to resolve references that way as well. So even though you may not want to go completely flat, if you can go not over and down, if you can make everything kind of local in the same folder structure, it makes things much faster in terms of content generation and pushing out to publishing as well. So that was a big lesson learned.
I like the idea that we went, in some cases, back to some of the legacy material. And I mentioned a little while ago the idea of the BC heading 2. In some of the legacy conversion, there were title with output class. And it had BC, Broadcom, heading level 2. And it worked. Technically, it works. But it means the human being has to go in and do the work in order to assign that that's a heading 2. And it's not bad, necessarily, that was in place. because it was a solution to the problem at the time, which included not being able to chop up the information and build the maps and structure it into what it should be. What was really good about it was consistent. We knew that if we went through and we found those BC heading 1s, heading 2s, heading 3 type of information, we could say, hey, you know what? This one topic that publishes as 8 pages, it could be chopped up into a map that has 6 topics in it. And as we go through those topics, we can identify that should have been a task and reconvert it. And yeah, it needs some downtime, but the net result, again, is getting back to consistent. It was a DITA to DITA migration.
Sure. And that's going to be easier, and so we still have an opportunity for cleanup. I think that will always be the case. You're always trying to improve your content, but that's absolutely true. Now that it's in DITA, we could do some scripting around it to clean it up even more than it already is. So
yeah, it's just a different way of migrating. And incidentally, for those who are listening live as opposed to listening to a recording, do let us know inside the chat if there's questions. We'll try to work them into the conversation. I think I've caught most of them, but if I've missed one, let me know. Some of the core lessons learned. The prep and planning was huge. I mean, we didn't turn anything around to you for months on end as a finished piece, and then all of a sudden it started just, the floodgates opened.
True. I mean, we did our information architecture and our content, our spreadsheet that showed where all the content goes from one thing to another, and prioritize what products we were going to do when. And it was several weeks before we got anything back from you guys. But then when we did, we could load it. So that was important, even though it took some time. But that planning and preparation ahead of time really paid off. We had time to do that this time around.
Yeah. It goes away from that, ready, fire, aim, and it actually does things in an order that technically makes sense, that all of us want to follow. Pardon?
Yeah, technically, right? I mean, we all want to have enough time for preparation and planning, but honestly, it is very key to the success of any migration is making sure you've accounted for everything that needs to be done, and also the people that need to do it.
Yeah, and the communications was fantastic. I mean, everybody on your team, you had meetings, but you didn't have meetings about meetings. And you didn't have meetings in order to discuss a lot of things that people could have tried in the past. Go in, try this in the system. Go in, think about this. Here's some content, look at it. Why does it not work? And then we went in and we had a meeting in order to resolve the issue, move ahead.
Right, and I think the other thing is, when we talk about people, one of the other reasons we really were pretty successful with this one is we paired people on my team who had experience with the system and experience with DITA with the writers. So what I did is pre-assigned. So each of the products had an assigned editor or tools person and assigned writer. And we paired those people together to do the content cleanup, get it into the system, and so on. And then that became a learning opportunity on both accounts. So my folks were learning from the writers about their needs in terms of, what the product does and how the product is. And the people from the business units were learning, this is what AEM does, these are the rules, and this is how we load content. So it was a learning opportunity for both. And, the idea is that they have to become a mini team to the success of this. So I was very, very lucky because our business unit stakeholders were on board with this structure, pairing people together in that way. So that worked really well. That worked really, really well.
It was great. The people when we interacted, it wasn't really an interaction with somebody who was part of the semantic team or somebody who was part of the CA team or part of the Broadcom team. It just felt like we were talking to people who had the same collective best interest in mind, which was getting good content in order to get answers to both customers and potential customers, in order to let people know, this is what your experience is going to be like when you're dealing with Broadcom. We're going to be able to get you what you need. And you've got interaction now with your people in the content, right? I don't remember exactly what, I don't have any notes in front of me. I should have written it down, but there was something I think you're setting up for content consumers to be able to communicate in some way with content creators.
Well, yes, we've done this already. We added just recently live fire to our system, which is a commenting feature for customers. So that's something we just did very recently. It is an AEM product. And so some of the pages, it depends on which product you select. Some of the semantic products do not have opted out of this, but if you go into the mainframe products, almost all of them will have some kind of a commenting feature if you go down to the bottom. Yes. And so this is something new that we've added, and our customers can go in and comment on the content, and we can, then the technical writers assigned to the content can actually address the issue that the customer may have. We're in early days, so we'll see how that goes, but so far so good. This is something that was a business imperative for the CA people. They had that on their old system, and they really wanted to have that interaction with customers. And I think it's a really good thing because you get to see what are customers saying about your content. And so it's good.
It's a huge difference to actively hear from people. And I often talk to people who say, yeah, but how are we going to be able to hear what our customers have to say? Well, talk to your sales team, talk to your support team, go to the actual conferences when they still exist or when they come back, where your customers are, and just listen in on the conversations. But this is direct feedback. Somebody can go in, and I have to say the idea of being able to get that direct feedback and then hear back from the company that provides the service is excellent. I had a internet service provider where I used to live. They don't provide service where I am now, but I recommended them highly to everybody I could talk to, because at one point I reached out to them and I said, it would be really neat if when you send me your invoice statement, in my subject line it just says invoice paid in full, here's your statement, as opposed to invoice you owe us money, because I was on an auto pay. And I got a message back maybe 15 minutes later. It said, that's a good idea. We're going to go and implement that. You should see it on your neck. Like, wait, what? You're actively listening? I don't get that from a lot of companies. And it's nice to see that you've integrated it directly into every single page that people who are working with the CA material interact with. That's another big one. And I think that goes to the third point. You're looking at the details. You're putting together CA. People asked for this, you put it into place. You've got the big picture idea of, we want to hear the experience of the customer. And then you turn around and you find ways to make it happen. So I think broadly speaking, you're hitting the stuff that I talk to people at customer sites about, that I talk to people at conferences about. I'd like to think part of it is because as an organization, I've seen Broadcom people attending webinars, attending workshops, when Adobe did their event, their AEM event in San Francisco, you had, by and large, the core of your team flew in from across the country. Unfortunately, it was in February, and we were still able to have that event before everything shut down. But it goes back to, I would say, all 3 points here. You did the preparation and planning. You knew that the event was coming up. Adobe knew that you were going to be there. They had key people. You had key people. Everybody got together. And while conversations went to this detail, that detail, the other, the overall big picture that they had in mind on the Adobe side was, we want to make sure Jolene and the team are happy. And the overall goal that you had is, we want to make sure that our content is best in the industry.
Well, that, and also our integrator was there, so we were able to get you together with our front end and back end AEM developers. So that was really helpful. And the timing was perfect for the beginning of that. Way we all knew each other, and we looked at all of the the most important issues that we were going to be facing.
Yeah. Somebody was asking about the live feedback, if you're considering any customer-generated content in the future, and I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
What is that? Say that again.
Any plan for customer-generated content?
Yeah, I saw that question, and not at this time. I think it's something we would have to discuss. We have a very diverse set of products on our site, and like I said, we're representing several different business segments. So not at this time, but it's something that I'm really fascinated by the prospect of that. I think what we will want to do is maybe more reviewer-generated content first before we would go to customers for customer-generated.
Right.
And then
Yeah, and I think Reddit
somebody,
is a great example of what sometimes can happen when you let your customers generate all of your content.
well, yeah, and we tend to be a little more conservative at Broadcom about that kind of thing, because you really want to moderate that. It can kind of get out of control if you don't have enough resources to moderate it correctly, you know. So
Yeah.
somebody had a question about if we encountered any major issues moving from one CMS for DITA to another. We did, and I wouldn't really call it major. I'd call it kind of a moderate roadblock. And that had to do with the way that our system was set up in terms of the use of book maps versus regular topic-based maps. We did work that out. It was pretty seamless. The bigger issue that we faced with the content that we pulled out of our former CCMS had to do with the generation of PDFs. In our former CMS, we were using Antenna House to generate PDFs, and AEM doesn't have a plugin for that, so we're just going with the open toolkit. So the business unit actually lost a lot of functionality that they really wanted and a lot of design inside their CMS. So that was one thing that happened with that.
Right. And so I just had the contact info up there because we've got under a minute or so to wrap things up.
Yep,
and
that's fine.
There's a couple of questions left that I'll try to answer in the chat, and Jolene may be able to jump into those as well. But I think those were sort of the three key takeaways we wanted to hit. How do you plan? What are some of the lessons learned? And, you know, content analysis is more than just converting it to the topics and maps. So I just want to give a quick thank you. We do have SlideShare. So if you go to SlideShare /Publishing Smarter, you'll be able to find the link. I'll throw it into the chat or the Q&A. And Jolene, thanks a lot. I know it's a time out of your day, and we had to put together a lot of material, so I really appreciate your efforts. To the two bloggers, have fun. Looking forward to reading more about this, and of course to Adobe for putting all of this together, and lastly to everybody who's attended. So very much appreciated.
Yep,
and
appreciate
Jolene,
it. Reach out to me.
word.
Yeah, reach out to me if you have questions. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer questions, and I'll stay around and answer questions here on the chat as well. So anyway, take care, and thank you very much for your participation.